Hello. Thank you for being here. My name's Russell Trafford-Jones. I'm the chair of IET Technical Networks. It's the media section. We really focus on anything to do with media. And the IET, Institution of Engineering and Technology in London, is a worldwide member organisation aimed at excelling in engineering and engineering a better future. So it's about what we can do today to make sure that tomorrow is better, not only in terms of technology, but also in sustainability, inclusivity, anything about society in general. So as a member organisation, an owner of IBC, it's no surprise that when we look around IBC, we see many amazing initiatives which support all of this. It's all about the technology as well as the people. And so we're delighted to be here as part of a programme of talks and videos about television, about the future of television, because we're now at 100 years since the beginning of television, depending on how you want to count it. The first demonstrations of a real working television were around 100 years ago. So in Hall 14, there's a whole exhibit about that. But what we're doing is we're making sure that we are learning from the past and looking to that future that we want to create, making sure that we're maximising everything that we can do. So to that end, that's what we're going to talk about today. The whole idea is to look back, not all the way to 100 years ago, that might be a bit excessive, but certainly in the last few decades, life has changed, and there's nothing wrong with that. But what is it that we have seen, and what can we learn from that? To explore this interesting aspect of our history and the future, I've got two people with me, which I'm delighted to speak to. This is Peggy Dau from Mad Perspectives, and this is Tim Forrest from ITN. Peggy, do you want to give us a little bit of intro into you and perhaps where you came to Mad Perspectives from?
Sure. So I came into this sector from the IT world. I had been working at Hewlett-Packard, and Hewlett-Packard came into this space really through content delivery networks because, oh my gosh, look at all the servers that have to sit underneath that software that makes all those algorithms. And then that extended into things like IPTV and digital workflows. So we were really early into this idea of like, oh, we could integrate all these different parts of a workflow, primarily in post-production and out through to play out. So that was kind of how I came into the sector. Attended my first IBC, I think, in 2000. And we demonstrated things from end to end. We had workstations to do editing and things like that. But then I left HP and started my own business to do consulting to lots of media tech companies. So Mad Perspectives is my business. And I've been fortunate to consult with a lot of different types of companies across the chain. So from Grass Valley and Avid to little itty bitty companies like EasyDRM and Meta Broadcast. A lot of the storage vendors along the way, Quantum, Storage Tech, which they, So I have this rather interesting perspective from IT, but also with some of those real traditional vendors as well. Very interesting.
And Tim, tell us about your background and what you get up to now.
Yes, absolutely. So as you say, I work for ITN. For those who don't know, that's Independent Television News, which is based in the UK. It's a B2B company. It primarily provides news for major public service broadcasters in the UK. So ITV, Channel 4 and Channel 5. It also has a very large production house that works off it. And it increasingly is in a space that occupies both television and digital. It's been around for 70 years this year. So again, when we're talking about that spread, we've been around for a very long time, and a large part of that, the majority of it. My job within that, my title is Head of Content Delivery and Commercial Innovation. I said to my boss, that's a very long title. And he said, yes, you've got a very big brief. I look after the syndication part of our business. I look after the archive part of our business. I have a digital part of my business, and I look at the different ways that the newsrooms need to be helped and provided for as part of that, and AI. Mm-hmm. So it's a broad brief, but it's a very exciting one, and it's certainly very engaged at the moment.
Mm-hmm. I think everything that we'll discuss rests upon this background of transitions. So perhaps the last time I'll go all the way back to 100 years ago, literally the television was partly mechanical. So the very first transition, fortunately, was mechanical to electronic, because we certainly wouldn't get where we are today with mechanical TVs. But the idea was there, that vision of what could be. And then as time went on, everything became digital. And we couldn't do what we do today without everything no longer being analog, being digital. Then we're into files. Files, we realized, well, perhaps now we've got lots of files, we'll have to change a few things, but we can send them over networks. And then sooner or later, we found networks were now the heart of everything that we do. So now it's live video over networks. And networks gave way to cloud. So, without being in the cloud, then we wouldn't have some of the services we actually see on air today. So we're in a whole host of transitions, and a lot of that has been perhaps driven by viewer behaviour or has enabled viewer behaviour. I don't know. What do you think is really, is it technology which is the leader, or is it sometimes that's true?
Right now, it's the consumer who's the leader. I mean, the direction that we're being travelled, we're being taken towards is where the audience lives. Now, the audience obviously lives in a different space to traditional broadcast media if they're under 25. Over 55 still have a big place for broadcast. And then the swathe in the middle, so intriguingly, are not as well understood, despite being the large paying portion of the public. We'll maybe set that to one side, but you're asking me who the core driver is. Actually, it should always be the audience anyway, but it definitely is at the moment.
I would agree with that, but I think there was a tipping point. I think there was a point where it was the technology first, and then because of technology, consumers became more capable of having an influence. So like if you look back to like cable, in the United States, cable delivery was a big thing in the 90s, right? They could have done video on demand content earlier than they did, but the consumer didn't understand what that was. And so there's somewhere in that shift between, at least in this kind of general industry, right, where you had broadcast and cable TV, and then you moved into this IPTV world where you had a feedback loop then, and that the consumer was able to start influencing because of that feedback loop. And now I totally agree with you. Now the consumer is driving so much because they realize that technology, I mean, there is still technology there, but they want the technology to do more for them and reach them in different ways and meet them where they are, just as you were saying,
Feels like, I think you're right, and sometimes my mind seems to go back to when kind of consoles were big, like 2 or 3 decades ago, when I feel like people bought HD TVs because they had an HD console. And that was a little bit before we'd got HD going over broadcast. And I don't know how much that was in that case. As you say, you've got to be in a position as a viewer to view it. Mm-hmm. So whether that's understanding or wanting things in a certain way, or whether it's literally just having the thing there. So, I think the popularization of, the Xbox and things like that helped push certain technologies into the living room. And then, they were not necessarily willing to go and buy a TV just to watch the news in HD. But by Jove, they want the news in HD if they've got an HD TV,
Right.
And look at where we're at today with, I walk into these very small rooms and the TVs are getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And we're being asked to turn out higher and higher and higher def content.
That's right.
A lot of which is watched on a smaller and smaller screen as well.
It's the conundrum, right? I mean, so the TVs have gotten really, really big. And we started off with smaller phones that got a little bigger, then they got a little smaller. And now you're seeing, potential phones with expandable screens.
Yeah.
Right? So what does that mean for distribution, right? Because what's that playback going to be? How does that get encoded? How does it know when it's this big versus that big? It's all the stuff behind the scenes.
And that simplicity of we've got one output is gone.
Completely.
Take us back to those kind of original streaming projects that you did, because I always remember someone saying, it was really impressive back when the first streaming hit the internet to even get an animated square the size of a postage stamp.
It was so funny. So that when I came into this sector when I was at HP, I was about halfway through my HP life, to be perfectly honest, and I didn't know a lot about this sector at all. But it was like, oh yeah, you have to be able to deliver content. You have to position it at a central point, and then you have to distribute it to the edge. And there's going to be algorithms about how all this works. And there were companies like Real Networks. Remember Real Networks? And they could stream video. Now, what was the video that everybody wanted aside from little squares and animations? It was porn. Porn has driven a lot in this world, sports and porn. but it was about sports. And I remember we were do you remember the old ITU conferences, International Telecommunication Union? So they used to do a conference every 4 years in Geneva. And so HP's there, and we had a demo about being able to watch video being delivered over an IP network, and it was enabled by Real Networks running in the background on HP servers. It was a baseball game, and I'm from the New York area. It was the New York Yankees. The pixelation was horrendous.
Could you see the ball?
No, of course not. But you could kind of see the baseball player kind of swinging the bat, and you knew there was a field out there and everything. But no, you could not see the ball at all. But that was the beginning, and the point was it was the beginning, and it was exciting because it could be done, and it had not been done before, But now, of course, with sports in particular, it's being distributed by a lot of different places, right? So it used to be a single network, like in the UK, Sky they would own, Premier League or something like that, right? But you guys, I think, are facing the same problem we have here in the United States, is that, oh, no, Amazon has it this day, and Apple has it that day, and the broadcaster has it this day. The fragmentation of that, and then how does it get delivered by each of them, to whatever device, right?
Do you think it's true, Tim, that perhaps back then we wanted to do some stuff, but it was limited by technology? Are we more in a situation where we're not limited by technology, we're limited to the fact we haven't got around to building the right workflow, or I don't know.
Yeah, that's certainly the case. I mean, the opportunity there is enormous at the moment. The fact is that we don't have the budgets the size of the big tech companies, and so we've all got to take this step by step at a time where these organizations that are the size and bigger often than countries are able to accelerate in a way that means that there's always going to be more that we could reach for. And it's a very difficult play.
Yeah, and I think, but I suppose the benefit is that we can build upon that immense IT.
Completely.
And that's effectively all your example, right? Is HP made some big servers.
Yeah.
Real was not about broadcasting. Real Networks was about just moving video.
It was about moving video. I think one of the things we saw too, and I think this is this IT perspective. IT has always been about integrating a bunch of different parts together to create a whole, right? So at the time that I was coming into this kind of space, and you talk about workflows, and of course, HP would never be here without digital workflows and digital media workflows, because why would we? As a company, have been there. But we were talking about this earlier about that trust. So if you integrate part A to part B, right? Do you trust that connection actually is going to exist? And then the data related to that, maybe that needs to pass out someplace else. Is it actually going to get there? And that was a big learning for us, was that any of the organizations that we were going to work with needed to trust that we were going to make sure that they were not stuck with a black screen, right? Because it can't happen in broadcast. In data, if you get a gap, right? If you're sending emails or sending, in the financial services sector, or if you're sending lots of data across, if there's a little glitch, it's just bits and bytes, right? We're talking about much vaster, complex files that needed to be moved around, and that was something that I think it took some time for us to actually really embrace how important that was. So why would an ITN have trusted us? Because how had we ever proven that we could do this and make sure that there wasn't going to be a black screen?
Yeah, and I think I think also because we then got to a point in broadcast where that trust was established.
Yeah.
But then this emerging technology of digital was much more Wild Westy and much more willing to embrace the it may fall over, but who cares?
Yeah.
And to a degree, broadcast waited and wanted to hold on to that trust that it could, it was known for.
Yes.
And I think actually a lot of organisations are still playing catch up to that. And it's allowed, for example, the creator economy to get to a place where, I mean, again, go back to under 25s and
Yes.
for news, very often that is where they're reaching for.
Oh no, they're going. If I talk to the 25s, I do a lot of mentoring, so I talk to a lot of younger people than myself, right?
Yeah.
And I do ask that question: where do you get your news? Social media. Well, okay, who on social? Is it an individual? Is it an organization or whatnot? Now, interesting, I've been pleased to know that they get it from organizations, because I feel like an organization, a news organization, is going to trust, validate their sources and things like that, right? Rather than an individual has an opinion, But they are getting it in different ways. They're not sitting down, at 7 o'clock at night and watching the evening news. It might, their parent might be watching it, might.
And yet they're as critical an audience to us as their parents.
Yes.
Yes. We are broadcasters. The whole point is it's for everyone. Now, I wouldn't pretend that we're going to put one product together for all that audience.
That's
but I absolutely want to be in a place where that younger audience trusts and believes and reaches for us in a format that is right for them.
That's right. That's right.
So let's talk about those formats, because I think what's really interesting about your role, or at least one part of your expansive role, is the fact that you're what you're known for, at least, and therefore a lot of your original content that you get first is a linear TV show in a kind of modern but traditional style of delivering the news. And I know there's all sorts of other kind of programs that you do, but primarily they're made in a way that can go on to linear television. And yet, so your job is to kind of work out how to split this up into something which is consumable in totally different ways in different places.
Yes, look, it's a challenge for all our newsrooms. It's a challenge that they've taken very seriously, and they're not starting from nowhere here. I'm interested that you say we're known for a linear television operation. You grew up knowing that. We've for example, ITV News has had a long-established TikTok presence and sees hundreds of millions of views across that every year. Similarly, Channel 4 has had a very big online presence and frequently sees enormous outputs through there. But I wouldn't necessarily expect you to know that, because you're not the audience. And when we talk about this fragmentation, part of this is that our organizations are no longer being necessarily seen through the same prism by everybody. I hope that what we are known for as ITN is for trusted news. What our format is, I actually don't mind where you get it. If you want to pick us up on TikTok, fantastic. It's great output. Go and see it. But equally, if you're going to want to watch our linear television programming, great. It's fantastic output. Go and see it. Our core is our news.
Yeah, absolutely. So perhaps we should talk about that trust and go a little bit further in. So, everything that we're talking about in terms of using new technology to make sure that trust is there, it comes under the C2PA system. So, I mean, from your perspective, Peggy, to what extent do you think C2PA can be part of the viewer's experience?
So I bet you the average viewer doesn't even know what C2PA is. But what I think what the point you're getting to is the content that you're viewing trusted content, right? Are images trusted images? Have they been edited, right? Because C2PA is about the provenance of that content. And what's that flow? I mean, I did an interview last year with a woman who's been involved with C2PA from a digital rights perspective and everything. And she's like, yeah, she goes, just imagine that. And I'm going to simplify it from an image rather than a piece of video because it's a little easier, right? So we all have photos, right? And now you can play, especially with AI now, you can go and you can edit that photo, but you like that original photo, and you want to tag that photo and know that that was Peggy's. Like I was on the train coming here with the woman who does wildlife photography. She wants to know that that picture of that lion is her picture. Somebody can go ahead and do something with it. They can edit it, but she wants the viewer to know that it was edited. And I think that's kind of where we're coming from with this whole C2PA story. I mean, it's more than a story. I mean, it's a really powerful initiative to make sure that everybody understands where that content comes from. But I would say, honestly, as someone that's a little bit more removed from it than I think you are, is that there's some mass education that needs to go on so that consumers start to understand what does provenance mean and how do you build trust around the content you're viewing wherever you're viewing it.
Look, here's a curiosity about C2PA is that it's been needed for years and years and years. A provenance tool is so essential, particularly for news around trust. And we are a trust business, and we're getting closer and closer to a place where being able to prove that our content is real is going to be too easily rejected by our audiences. However, I don't yet think that C2PA is ready to be rolled out to the public. I think it is a protocol that is still being understood across the piece, still being developed across the piece, and to go to our audience with it right now is too early.
That's fair.
I think it's essential that we do everything we can to keep the acceleration, to keep our foot on the pedal, and to keep C2PA progressing. But I have a problem even with it being called C2PA. Your average person in the street going, check the C2PA provenance on that. It's going to be so tough.
And the average user doesn't think about the term provenance either.
No.
Trust, however, is the word.
Yes, and I absolutely think that this is a trust market, and this is a trust stamp.
Yes.
There is a lot to be said around trust.
So we managed to achieve that though over perhaps 15 years or so with HTTPS, with secure bank. No, really that's where it came in, right? People wanted to do online banking. They needed the trust that someone was going to steal your data halfway through. And so gradually people have looked for the green little padlock, and I think, to be honest, that's gone away now because people are so used to having that trust that we now do it by exception. Now, I don't think we'll get to that perhaps point with C2PA, but can you imagine a future, what it might look like when people are a bit more educated and they know what it is? That's what I mean by that. But how would it look if I'm watching a linear broadcast as a live stream of some news and there's clips being played in? I've got to trust the whole thing. I can't be individually kind of flagging fake AI clips.
Although actually, let's be honest about a lot of faked content is that it's an insertion. So you've got 99% truth and 1% that has completely altered the entire meaning. So actually, part of the complication of this is that you've got to build for all those eventualities, and we don't have the answer yet. Where we're getting closer is that I think people, you've even referred to it in your question, it's a visual output. It's some way of being able to recognize it. There's actually something that we're showing off here at IBC. We've been working on a stamping tool, and the engineers that have developed it have just been running it against a player which has a play bar across the bottom. And when it hits a piece of content that is not C2PA compliant, the color changes at the bottom. And it's amazing how that just changes your understanding of what you're watching. You don't need to be mass educated. We don't need to take people out into schools and churches and into the community to shout about it. You're instantly alerted to it, and you suddenly want to go finding out about it. And then the content credentials button that so many of us have seen is an easy reach.
Yeah, that's true. Just I haven't been to your booth to see that demo. Now, is that AI enabled? I mean, because I think that's a big part. It's part of the problem. It's part of the solution.
Yeah. So look, again, getting back to C2PA being a protocol, I think yes. The easy answer is yes. The other answer to say around this is that I think the protocol is the moment where all these different technologies are kind of gathered up. Because I think what we've seen around the industry is not one single solution for how to protect your provenance. And indeed, with AI being both the solution and the problem, if we had a single solution, within 10 minutes it would be usurped. So this is going to be a changing and emerging trust business that evolves over time. So watermarking, for example, or thumbnail technologies, through this stamping tool are kind of gathered up to the point that a C2PA stamping tool can recognize it, and then beyond that, it's been trained to go hunting for it within a system, so it can find whether or not a manifest can be re-established based on earlier content.
Let's turn our attention to something perhaps on the more practical side of things. I'm imagining a longer news piece of 5 minutes discussing some of the latest things that are happening. A reporter on the ground, and you've put that piece together. What can you do practically to editorially maintain the trust as you push that down to 30, it's the accuracy more than the trust, but 30 seconds, a 1 minute version of that. What problems does that give to you? Do you need more people? Do you need a different skill set for editorially for the people working on smaller, bite-sized news?
Well, there's not one answer to that. There's some stories that are better suited being told short. There's some stories that are better suited to being told long. There's some people who are better suited to telling it short. There's some people who are better suited to telling it long. There's some formats that are only watched short, and there's some formats that you sit back and you push back. So I'm sorry to not answer it, but it's just too broad.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think, but it's certainly something that, going back to the AI conversation, where we say, oh, well, AI can clip this, AI can clip that. It's like, well, that's basically true, but everybody has to be like hooks.
Still needs a little guidance.
Yeah, exactly. It's crazy in that respect. I guess one thing that is important that we acknowledge is the original vision from John Logie Baird, who invented the mechanical TV. The name is well suited because the vision was, no pun intended, to be able to see things at a distance, right? So there was no particular presumption that you'd watch it on a square or a rectangle and which direction the rectangle would be. So, from that perspective, I think what's happening to television as we understand it and broadcast isn't anything different than perhaps was always meant to be, but because we're so used to that, I certainly hear people withdrawing from saying the word television or broadcast, preferring to say streaming or media and entertainment and things like that. So I'd be interested in your thoughts about whether we should be leaning in and changing the meaning of television, or perhaps we should be changing the conversation.
So for me, the word television is ubiquitous. Mm-hmm. It means being able to enjoy some type of a program on some type of a screen. And whether that's live or on demand or whatever the case is, it's television. Television is a form of entertainment. Like going to the theater is a form of entertainment. That's how I look at television. It's not about the device. No. It's about the overall form of entertainment. And that includes news, that includes sports, and everything. But you can't talk about the lean back or lean in experience anymore because everybody's consuming in the way that matters the best or works best for them. Mm-hmm. So for me, television is that experience.
And yet you've got television and you've got digital, right? And digital is one of those in or mo words that means not television.
I don't see it that way.
Well, I mean, but it's interesting. You know, I'm involved in so many conversations with people where they make television, or at least they began by making television, and they'll talk about their television strategy, which tends to be linear, and they'll talk about their digital strategy, which tends to be absolutely everything else.
So I think that's coming from a broadcaster community side of things versus me as an IT world, right? And so don't get me wrong here, the IT world can be terribly siloed as well. But I see it as I'm working with different of my clients and dealing with the broadcasters, how terribly, and I don't mean terribly in a bad way, I mean like in the word of vastly, siloed. Because you have your traditional ways of doing things. And then when digital came along, it's like, okay, well, that digital has to be done over here. And you have a workflow over here for digital, and you have a workflow over here for silos. Like one of my clients is in metadata, and you have metadata over here for linear, and you have metadata over here for streaming or on demand. And seemingly, never the twain shall meet, but yet the twain has to meet. Because operationally, you would be so much more efficient if the twains were intertwined.
And I think that's where we are, is at the meeting point.
Right.
I mean, you know, this began with a discussion really about semantics.
Yeah.
But what is television out of this?
Yeah.
You know, we're not just going to call ourselves digital, because I think it's just too amorphous.
Because digital could mean so many
Correct.
media industry things.
Well, indeed, I'm sure that's why it's there, right? Because
Yeah.
you know, you suddenly needed a website, and now you need to stream, and it's all digital. So let's just call it that.
Yeah.
You know, and it can be as much about publishing as it can be about, you know, films.
Yes.
But we do have the ability, you know, to move away theoretically from the word broadcast, because if that isn't the most but that's only if you understand it perhaps in the way that I understand it. You know, I'm thinking of a big pole in the middle of the country, and then everyone.
We describe ourselves as a content powerhouse. So we've moved into what we produce, and we lean into that because we've got so many different parts and aspects to it, and we do have a deep understanding of digital. But it's in many different forms, and in some ways, for a news and production house like we are, describing ourselves as a content powerhouse really does have the effect of people understanding that we are where we're led and where we're going.
So as a production house and doing linear and digital, is the production process dramatically different between linear and digital? I mean, I understand the distribution mechanisms are different and whatnot, and so that part of the whole workflow is going to be a little bit different, right? But do you produce differently?
I mean, you can do, and you can. Let me take the example of one of our newsrooms where we shifted away from having siloed teams that were, in purely on linear programs or purely on different aspects of digital outputs, and we wanted to create a base where it was story-led. And to do that, we invested in our people to train them, to upskill them from wherever they began, to be able to work across all those different outputs. That doesn't mean, though, that we're then just producing the single output.
Right.
And of course, there's people who are maybe better at one aspect than another, and we recognize those talents and would lean into that. So again, it's not a simple, yes, we have a single
but
workflow.
But that was helpful clarification for me. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
You know,
I think one way that we can perhaps start to think about whether things are going to change is certainly with people thinking that television is this, linear stream. With TF1's agreement with Netflix to stream via Netflix, I wonder whether, again, it's coming back to your point about which prism are you looking at it from. So, I'm thinking, well, they seem quite different, but then if I imagine what another prism might look like, it's like, well, I didn't really know that was there, but now there's a live stream, I'm quite happy to watch that. So it's not like, perhaps there's not a judgment about, oh, this is television, but they're sneaking it into Netflix. This is just you go.
And I think one reason behind that is it's now, it used to be a widely held fear that you would eat your audience by sitting in many different places. And I think that's gone away. I think the fragmentation piece that we talked about earlier means that actually you grow your audience by sitting in multiple different places. And I think that's just an expansion of that.
Well, you've seen that with Bluey on YouTube as global phenomena, which it couldn't have been if it wasn't on YouTube, to be perfectly honest. And I've read about both C4 and ITV in their YouTube expansions and whatnot. I mean, so
if we talk about changing viewer behaviour, I think it would be remiss not to mention. It's easy to talk about TikToks and the and YouTube Shorts, which do drive massive amounts of views. But has there not been a change in things on YouTube whereby they're able to have 3, 4, 5 hour kind of conferences, or not conferences, conversations, debates, and these are they're kind of almost insane lengths of time from what would traditionally be put on television, but it opens up perhaps more opportunities. I don't know.
I think YouTube has recognised that there's different uses for television. I think the traditional broadcast view was that you watched it from beginning to end, and that's what you did. And I think YouTube has recognised that that a 5-hour broadcast might be sort of breezed into and out of. That doesn't mean it's not there, and that other things might be going on at the same time. So it's a step that is very well understood from their end. It doesn't mean that every video has to be 5 hours.
Oh, for sure. But I don't know if it drives
space for that.
Potentially different format possibilities and for directors and people who are creating content for perhaps a wider audience. It's always the problem, I guess.
Well, in the United States, right, you have them everywhere, right? Soap operas, you have them everywhere. There are soap operas that are developed just for YouTube in the United States, which it's fascinating to me. But they've gone to the shorter form, meaning like 15-minute episodes rather than the half hour or whatever it traditionally has been. So you do have creators saying, this is going to be my outlet. I'm going to create my monetization model around this. I'm going to attract my audience. But it's easier for me to it's easier and less expensive for me to produce for YouTube. And of course, a lot of that is the evolution that we're talking about, and all those surrounding technologies that, you don't need to have a big expensive camera. You don't have to have a big expensive editing suite anymore. Everything's become a little bit more accessible. I sit here, I do social media for some of my clients, and I'm putting Canva things together on my phone. I don't need to have some big, Adobe suite to do it.
No, but I think one of the remaining real differences for studio-based TV is the ability to get 3, 4 people, usually famous people if you can, together. And broadcasters have got that legacy of being able to access these people perhaps more easily. Not to say other famous people can't get other famous people, but I still feel that despite everything, there are very few attempts to recreate the same formats that I would typically see on TV in YouTube, from that kind of live chat show type view, because it tends to be more podcast based.
Yeah.
Do you know? I mean, look, this is extending me beyond news. So
disclaimer understood.
Well, but I actually see a lot of reach from what you might term a broadcaster, or certainly a streamer, towards that content creation community, and actually almost using it as their test bed. You've seen some of the enormous stars, Mr. Beast being an example, taking their brand and getting it commissioned in a more traditional set. So, I think this whole ecology is just beginning to mix itself around. It doesn't yet exist in news, but it's something that we're thinking really heavily about, is how do we engage with that content creator community? What does that look like? And how do we maintain our position as a trusted news organisation, whilst accepting that, this is a major part of our industry now.
There's obviously a lot of thought and a lot of technology is going into delivering to all of these platforms, particularly for organisations such as yours, and that will continue to change as we go into the future. It's harder to anticipate how viewing will change. What's the consumer behaviour? But have you got any thoughts on like how we might suddenly find ourselves in 5-10 years no longer doing exactly what we're doing now, right? Without I don't know, if you want to, you can imagine another TikTok thing coming along, and then because we wouldn't be talking about that perhaps 5 years ago. So, but
I mean, look, we're still sitting in the foothills of AI, and the pace of change is just enormous. And what we think of now as devices that we hold in our hands and have been type texting into are already becoming discussions and conversations, and I can just see that pace picking up so much that I think if I say anything further now, I'll be watching myself back in 2 years' time going, just got that wrong.
Yeah. No, I think your point about AI is really interesting. I think that like what you say about texting and using a keyboard, that's all based in the past, right? Like the typewriter, right? And it's evolved to being a keyboard for a computer and a keyboard on our phones. And I mean, remember the early phones? You had to do 111 to click everything 3-4 times. Today's kids would have hated that for texting each other, right?
Well, I hated it too, but yeah, I
too, but
totally get it.
But you can see that with AI, that audio interpretation is going to be like, and you see it here on the floor. You see where AI is being applied strongly now, which is in like the dubbing and in the captioning and things like that are somewhat kind of audio communication oriented. There'll be more for other types of other parts of the production and whatnot, and even for the distribution, because I could truly see, you're going to see the DRMs and the encoding become, I personally feel, very AI centric. Like, well, what kind of network is it? Let's say, okay, I know that this is generally going to be, because it's algorithms, isn't it? At the end of the day, lots of different types of algorithms, and they're just going to get smarter and more predictive.
I think perhaps the thing to remember or to take from is we've still got TVs in most living rooms, and people are still watching the TV, but they're also watching their phone, and sometimes they're watching phone or they're just doing something else. So that's been a massive growth, but on the other hand, it hasn't totally usurped the big screen.
No.
Similarly, the moment something like speaking to your phone comes along, it's really useful when I'm doing my notes or whatever. I'm thinking through, I'm talking. But if I'm at the back of this room, I'm not going to be chatting into my phone. I'm going to be sending a quick text message. So whatever perhaps we do see in the future isn't perhaps going to be pushing out the YouTube shorts of today.
No, I think to borrow off the BBC, to inform, to educate, and to entertain is what our media does at its best. And there's no one answer to that. Sometimes you want to kick back, relax, and have it brought to you. Sometimes you want to interact with it. Sometimes you want to interact with 3 or 4 things, and you want to be consumed in multiple different ways. We are away from the point now where we are a single output, and we're moving fast away from the point where that single output is. We've been talking a lot about devices, but we haven't touched on personalization and localization, and that whole world is about to ignite as well. And that is incredibly exciting, and is a world that we're about to discover.
That's a very good point, and I do acknowledge that with AI being available now all the easier, then it should allow that kind of personalization to happen. Excellent. Well, look, thank you very much for being here and talking to us today. This is Peggy and Tim. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.